So hi everybody, it's Alex again, and this lesson we're gonna set up night lighting, or dusk lighting to be more precise. In these references that I've found, it isn't exactly night, the sun has just gone down, and this type of lighting is the best to display architecture. The main light here is a fill light coming from the sky. If it was late at night, the sky would have been black, and we would probably only have one light source. That will be the interior light. In that case, we wouldn't be able to properly see the architecture in the scene. So that's not right. Night photos like this are actually made about 1 hour after sunset, or an hour before sunset, when there's no direct sunlight anymore, but there's a glow in the sky from the setting sun. This is when the lighting is the best. By the way, I took this reference from the bonus materials that you can also use. And by the way, this Miro board contains references with different types of lighting. If you need references for your projects, feel free to draw from this library. All right, time to get started. Let's go back to 3ds Max and study the reference. We have two types of lighting here. It's blue fill light and complementary interior light. And so together they create a beautiful, eye-pleasing image. And I opened these images in PureRef and placed them on top of other windows to have the reference handy at all times. This window is a bit in my way, so I'll size it down. Okay, so today we're gonna work on this scene. It's a project that we did for a client from France. We're gonna use this scene to learn how to set it up. So how to set up dusk lighting. Here you can see residential apartments as well as commercial premises on the ground floor. We're gonna use different types of light sources in this scene. And of course, we're gonna rely on the references. First, we'll set up fill light and then add interior lights. But first, let's do some pre-settings. Let's go to render setup. I had these settings on my second screen. Here we have single map selected. The color is white. We'll start interactive render to see what our scene looks like at the moment. Also be sure to follow my tips from the previous video. I've hidden scatter grass, small elements, and things like that. And this will speed up our render. The scene has been converted from V-Ray. We can see that it already comes with some lighting in it. We need to delete the sun and other light sources. Select lights, select the entire scene, and go ahead and press delete. Okay, now that we've deleted all the light sources that we didn't need, we'll switch back to camera. And now our scene has default settings. You can see that very clearly. So let's get started. So I'm gonna use the Mozo script that I mentioned in the previous video. And of course you can import HDRI maps to Material Editor and apply them to your scene. But like I said earlier, I strongly recommend using the script. Alright, So first we need to create fill light. Make sure you have the MTL override option enabled. Here we have default clay material. And then we select preserve glass materials. Hope that'll work. Yep, it worked. Windows are now transparent. And now let's start to set up lighting. We'll select a post-sunset HDRI map. It should be blue. I recall just the right map in the Peter Guthrie Sky collectible. Here it is. It has this intense blue color, but you can use any map you want, depending on your reference and your personal taste. It's just that it should be after sunset. So I double click on our HDRI map, and nothing happened yet. That's because we need to switch to 3ds Max settings and go to Environment tab. Okay, so we already have some kind of lighting. So take note that these Peter Guthrie maps are very bright by default. With exposure at 1, you're likely to have a scene that's too bright. So we need to decrease exposure. Let's bring it down to 0.01 and see how the scene will change. Oh well, that's too dark. Our reference is lighter. By the way, you can place PureRef on top of all windows. You do it by right-clicking on it and selecting Mode, Always on Top. This way you'll always have your reference before your eyes. So let's increase exposure to 0.5. Sorry, 0.05. The brightness is almost like in the reference, but the shade is different. The reference has more violet in it. Let's place the reference on top again. All right, we need to adjust the color. But first, let's just try to rotate our HDRI map first. And we might end up achieving an interesting light shadow effect. Now, I don't like what we have so far. If the map had a clear sky without clouds, the architecture would contrast well against the sky. Let's rotate the map around its axis. We might find just the right value. This looks pretty good. The geometry contrasts against the sky. Remember that there's a setting called gamma. By decreasing gamma, you can make your image more contrasting. But in this case, we don't need that. Let's rotate the map to achieve a better light shadow effect. And this is what we've talked about in the first video. We need this so that our geometry doesn't look flat. If anything, you can just replace your HDRI map. Our map is alright though. Still, let's see what we can replace it with. Just for an overview. So this map looks good actually, but it's a little too bright. So we need to decrease exposure to make it darker. All right, now the brightness is fine. We only need to adjust the shade. This HDRI looks better because the light falls from the right side. And these facades are lighter than these. And the architectural geometry is more visible. Also, the architectural shape is well defined against the sky. All right, now let's adjust this HDRI to match our reference. The Mozo script automatically creates a correction map that you can use to adjust your HDRI. Let's go to Material Editor and press 8 to open the Environment and Effects tab. this map here is our current light source. So I drag it over to Material Editor as an instance. All right. Now this map's linked to color correction map, which means that we can use this color correction map to improve our scene. For example, to adjust the map's shade, we need to move this hue shift slider. Suppose we need to make the map more violet. We'll move the hue shift slider to the right. In the interactive render, we see that the map has turned violet. And I think that's too much. Let's reduce it a little. And this is how we're gradually getting closer and closer to what our reference looks like. Let's make it 7. We can change gamma and other parameters as well. All right, now as far as correction goes, I think that's quite enough. Let's decrease gamma to 0.9. All right. And so that looks pretty good. Pretty close to the reference. It's no rocket science, guys. You simply need to choose the right HDRI and edit it. Rotate it if necessary. Make it look good. Although the original version was kind of closer to the reference. So how do you know how bright your HDRI map needs to be? What exposure to choose? Well, that's pretty easy. Just need to look at the sky in our reference. And I recommend using photos as references because they tend to be less photoshopped, kind of. If you're using a render as your reference, make sure to pick a high quality render that looks like a photo. Otherwise, you risk repeating the mistakes made by the visualizers who made the render. So that's why you should stick with the photos. Alright, so I've set up the color and brightness of the fill light, and now we need to set up interior lighting. Here we have some nuances that I'd like to address. So I think that this is just the right project to show how to set up interior lighting, actually. Because here we have something like commercial premises on the one hand and residential apartments on the other. So let's start with apartments. And I don't think that we need to light up all the windows because there are too many of them. Plus, if all windows are lit up and have the same brightness, it just never looks good. So apartment complex looks best when about half of the windows are illuminated. So we're gonna set up light sources and arrange them in our scene. But first, we need to change viewport layout. Let's choose this 2-window layout. In the right window, we switch to camera by pressing C on the keyboard and then lock this camera view. Right, what we did that for? So now when working in the left window, like shifting objects, light sources, and so on, our interactive render won't switch over. We'll have the render before our eyes and we'll be able to compare it against the reference. So that's very useful. All right, now let's create our first light source and we'll go to Lights, pick Corona Light. And my advice is that you should use spherical lights for interiors. So let's go ahead, select sphere and place it somewhere over here. We're using the default settings at the moment. And now let's set up our light. It can be a floor lamp or chandelier, doesn't matter. We'll set the radius to 20 centimeters. And now the color. White is the default color. So to achieve this effect, we need to pick another one. And I recommend using Corona color picker for that matter. Let me show you how it works. We'll go to Customize, to Preferences, and then here in the Color Selector field, we select Corona Improved Picker. All right, and next, just click this field, and here it is, our Corona Color Picker. It's a more advanced tool. It has this eyedropper, and so we click this eyedropper and keeping the left mouse button pressed, take the color from the reference. We need to color of this light. Here's one important thing though, make sure that this light shines on a white surface. Because if it shines on a colored surface, its color is distorted. But it looks like the walls inside that apartment are all white, so it's okay. And so next we set the value to maximum. I've got this yellow light. Let's try again. Okay. See, we already have some light here. And now let's set up this light. First, we need to select intensity units. And I recommend that you use lumens because they're not affected by the size of the light. Let's see how it works. Switch to default and change the radius. See, the light started to shine brighter. Now let's switch back to lumens and reduce the radius. The brightness hasn't changed. And this is exactly what we need. So, okay, we've picked the color. Now we need to set up brightness. We can do that by simply looking at our reference. Let's place this light inside the interior, here behind the curtains. That's too bright. We don't want that. So let's decrease brightness to make the details inside our interior visible. So we'll decrease intensity until we achieve a soft, a delicate kind of looking light. I'm checking with the interactive render to see what we're getting. To speed things up, we can use region selection. And I think that looks good. Some of you may ask, why are we using a sphere, not a disk or a plane? Now, using a spherical light it's better because it shines in different directions and illuminates objects inside your interior. And so as a result, our lighting gets brighter, more kind of pleasing to look at and more sort of homogeneous overall. So we're going to use other types of lights as well. For now, let's continue. And I'm just going to call it interior light. And pay attention now we switch to top view. And while I keep shift pressed, copy this light outside our scene. And make sure you copy it as an instance. So we're going to use it as a controller. We're going to copy these lights and put them inside other apartments. And then, when we need to switch them off by type, we'll simply need to select this light outside our scene. Uncheck the on box and all the lights will switch off. Alright, now we need to place lights inside some of the interiors. I'll switch to lights mode. And so now, when we're arranging lights, the geometry will stay in place. In some interiors, we place just one light, in others two. That completely depends on your preferences and vision. Here we see the light move into the balcony. So let's move it back. Move it back in. And I know that arranging lights and objects can be a bit dull and sort of a bit of an uncreative process, but it needs to be done either way. So the color of lights can vary across apartments, but let's not think about it for now. We can diversify them later. And at this point, we're adding identical lights in all apartments. From the interactive render, we can see how our scene is changing. By changing the position of a light, we can make a window brighter or dimmer. And if a window has curtains, they'll be illuminated too. If there's furniture in the interior, it'll be more visible. And that will certainly add more details to the overall scene. Lights in the references are more or less identical in terms of brightness and color. So we're going to stick to the reference. Let's add another light here. And I think that should be it. Okay. So we've added lights to some of the apartments. Some of the windows are dark, but that's okay. So now we're going to work on the commercial premises. And it looks like they call for brighter lighting. For this purpose, we're going to use another type of light. And we'll use the disc lights. Apart from residential apartments, we also have shops here. And let's go ahead and add a layer called Commerce. So these are mannequins there, see? Let's illuminate these shops. We're gonna use the same color of lights, but on a second thought, we could opt for a colder lighting. So I'll create a new Corona light, select the disc shape as we agreed, and place it where we have a point light source in the shop. I'll press Alt-Q to enable isolate selection, and do this in order to correctly position a light inside the spotlight. To correctly direct the spotlight, we need to enable Targeted and stir it in the right direction. Next, we copy this light as instance here and here. And now we can disable isolate selection. Let's see what we've got. Oh no, it's too bright. So let's decrease intensity a little bit. So as we were saying earlier, let's make this lighting a bit colder. And let's also make it a bit greenish. So this green sort of shade will indicate that we have shops and other commercial premises here. So let's copy this light outside our scene. Next, we also need to add this light inside other shops. Alright, that's done. Now we have another shop here on the ground floor. Let's illuminate it. It already has some lights, but they're switched off. And let's switch them on and look at them again. Looks pretty good. They have color and Kelvin temperature. For interior lights, it varies from 2000 to 500. And it's kind of orange, to 4,500. So let's set it to 4,000 and see what it looks like. Let's go down to 3,500. Next we need to light up this area. Some kind of cafe, I guess. There's people sitting there. And let's use the same light we've been using. Now pay attention, you can see these plain lights here. And in order to make them visible, we need to uncheck visible in reflection and visible in refraction. So we mustn't see them through the glass. So we can disable generate caustics and occlude other light. Let's add some more light in here. And this cafe. If you have a close-up view, you need to place your lights exactly where chandeliers, lamps, spotlights, and other light sources are located. So you need to arrange your lights based on the position of those light sources. But here we have a general view. We see our building from a distance, so it doesn't make much sense to arrange lights too accurately. We just need to create this overall visual effect. All right, here we have some openings. It's where light sources fit in, I suppose. Let's add the same light, although of different color. So we'll create a corona light and select the disc shape. And let's place our disc somewhere over here. Now in perspective view, we put it inside the interior. You see those openings stood for these poles here. Okay then, let's place our light under this ledge and see if it works. So I'll just put it closer to the surface like this. And now let's check out the brightness. Take the color from the reference, switch to direct input, open Corona color picker and use the eyedropper tool. We could have copied the color from the previous light, but never mind. Now let's adjust intensity. We can use default units or lumens. Use whichever option you like best. Let's copy this light and add a few more of them at the cafe entrance. Make sure to always copy your lights as instance. Okay, now the cafe is well lit. Let's make the lighting a bit brighter. I want to achieve this effect here, so let's increase intensity to 200. And here's an important detail. We can actually make our disc lights shine downwards. There's a parameter called directionality. It's currently at 0, which means our lights shine all around them into all directions. Now, if we change directionality to say 0.5, our lights will shine downwards, like spotlights. So now the lighting in this area is more focused and not scattered in separate directions. So we can use the same lighting effect for balconies. Let's illuminate this balcony, use the same lights, copy it, and just move it a bit higher. Make sure it doesn't lap with the geometry. Now let's arrange these lights all over the balcony. It would be great if we had openings or some kind of geometry for these lights. Then it would look more realistic. Now, okay, so the balcony is now illuminated, and let's try to increase the brightness. That's too much? Too intense? Because a balcony of an apartment can be illuminated brighter than commercial premises. So let's decrease brightness twofold, down to 500. So I think that looks good. So we've set up lighting for apartments and commercial premises. And now let's add a few accent lights so that our scene is not that dark. Street lights would look good here. So let's take a look at the reference. There are no street lights, but we'll add them anyway. So I'll create another Corona light for street lights. Now, which shape should we choose? That depends on what street lights you already have in your scene. In this scene, we have no street lights at all. So let's go for disc. We'll set the radius to 15 and place our light 7 meters, give or take above the ground. And so now our render has this new light. It has the same color as the previous one. And let's make it more intense, more yellow. Replace our street lights where you'd logically expect them to be. Now place one light behind the camera. It should illuminate the foreground. Also, let's illuminate this remote part of the building, because at the moment it looks too dark. As you can see, this light shines downwards. These leaves are very beautifully illuminated, by the way. And I think we need to slightly change the direction. Let's decrease it to 0.8. This way our streetlights will shine in all directions, but now they've become dimmer. That's why we need to increase their brightness. If that doesn't help, we can change their shape to sphere. The brightness is at maximum right now, and I think that's actually too much. Let's change it to 1000 and move the light further away from the building. And so this way we get this soft, delicate light, the one you're used to seeing when looking at streetlights. It wouldn't hurt to add actual streetlights, I guess. This area certainly needs to be lightened up. And let's place a light somewhere here. Looks pretty much like in the reference. This scene is not too dark, it's not too gloomy, it's rather contrasting, and I think it looks very nice. Alright, so what else do we need to know? So I recommend that you use Lightmix. And Lightmix allows you to set up lights by groups. It's a fast and easy way to work. Although, to be able to use it, you'll have to group all of your lights. Now let me show you. So we'll select these street lights and we'll go ahead and group them. Just call them street lights. And then head over to our interior lights, and with the right mouse click, select similar. And so all interior lights are now selected. We'll press Alt Q to select all interior lights, and then group them. We'll group them as interiors. And next we group shop lights. Next, entrance and balcony lights. We'll call them points. And finally, cafe lights. Okay, so we've grouped all of our light. Now, pay attention. We stop interactive render. Then we go to render settings. Set up light mix. Select group lights and click generate. And then we restart the render. We head over to the light mix tab and see that all of our lights are now grouped in this manner. The lights that haven't been grouped are also here. Let's switch off all the lights and set up lighting with light mix. And so what you need to know is that light mix requires a high performance computer and it takes up a lot of your RAM memory. Here we have interior light. It's our main fill light. We can adjust its brightness and its shade. Let's make it warmer. So a bit like this. And then we have cafe lights. Once again, we can change their brightness and color. In case we don't have, in case we don't like the warm shade they currently have, let's make them colder. Or actually, let's make them more yellow, green. We can also edit our interior lights, our point lights, shop lights, and of course our street lights as well. Let's make our street lighting warmer. So after we've finished editing our lights, we click Scene to bake all the changes into the scene. And after that, we can delete light mix altogether. Stop the interactive render and go to Corona, Render Elements, select all render elements, and click Delete. Okay, so we've set up lighting in our scene. Now let's see how our render looks with materials in it. Restart interactive render and go to render settings, over to the scene and uncheck MTL override. And voila, this is how our lighting looks like now. If you want to make the image lighter or edit other things, go ahead and do that. We're going to do a little tone mapping and slightly increase exposure, but it's hardly necessary. I think our scene matches the reference pretty good. I don't know, I like it how it came about. So personally, I would add a wet walkway here, perhaps. It would produce interesting reflections, but material setup is not the subject of this masterclass. All right, so to learn about material setup, sign up for our big training program. And that's pretty much it for today. In the next videos, we'll learn how to set up overcast and sunset lighting. Thanks for watching. See you next time.